Hi, teachers and students. I'm Laura Baker, and I am with Dr. Gregory White from the University of Texas, San Antonio, but who now lives in Wyoming. We're so lucky to have him here. And today we're going to give you some ideas about the challenge topic for the Cyber in a Box School Video Challenge. And the challenge topic this year is the securing critical energy infrastructure. And we're using this challenge topic because we received a grant from the Idaho National Lab, and that is what is making the Cyber in a Box School Video Challenge tick this year. Dr. Gregory White and I met, we met in, I think, 2018 at Cyber Texas, and he listened to my presentation and contacted me afterwards, and he had no idea he was going to retire in Wyoming at the time. But he gave me some great advice about my startup nonprofit, which you now know is the Cyber Wyoming Alliance. And we've been friends ever since. He's also, what you may not know about Dr. White is he literally wrote the book about information sharing and analysis organizations. And he is also a children's author. And you can read his book about the Moose family and how their family day was interrupted by cyber attacks on the wyocan.org website. So, Dr. White, is there anything that you'd like to say that I might have missed?
No, I think that's it. Other than the fact that we're enjoying Wyoming. My wife wanted to retire here because she has a sister who lives in Wyoming, so that's where we're at, and we're enjoying it.
I bet you really are now that it's summer and it's hot in San Antonio.
Yes, it's much nicer up here in Wyoming than it is down in Texas.
Until February, right? Okay, so I'm going to start Dr. White's screens, and he'll let me know when we need to go to the next slide. And I'm going to let him talk for a while because he's very eloquent. He's one of my favorite speakers, and I hope you enjoy this, and it gives you great ideas for our challenge topic this year for the Cyber in a Box School Video Challenge. All right, take it away, Dr. White.
Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity, Laura, to be here and to talk about cybersecurity because it is absolutely something that I love. It's a topic that is great. It's a great topic. It's a great career field for anybody who's wondering what they ought to do for the rest of their life. Consider cybersecurity. It's always changing. Does not get boring, and it is exceedingly important for the nation as well. So we're going to talk a little bit, as was mentioned, about cybersecurity and how it can potentially impact the various critical infrastructures, in particular, the energy infrastructure. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about, to start off with, I mean, a question that many people might wonder is are communities really a target in the first place? Why would anybody, we're living in the city of Lyman, less than 3,000 people here. Well, who cares about Lyman, Wyoming, and why would it be a target? And why would anybody attack the infrastructures here, whether it be water or power or the city emergency services or whatever? Why would they attack any of those critical infrastructures? What we did a couple of years ago, and I had a graduate student, and he was working on his dissertation, and he needed some data from that basically would reflect traffic within a community of the city. And so what he did is he basically created a fake community. We refer to it as a honey community. For those of you who know anything about cybersecurity, similar to a honey net or a honey pot, which is a fake item that you set out there to allow the individuals who are potentially want to attack you. They look at and they attack these things, and you monitor them, and you can spot them easier. So he set up a fake community called the City of Roadrunner Park. There is no such thing as Roadrunner Park. It was supposedly a community right outside the University of Texas at San Antonio. Our mascot is the Roadrunner. And so he set this up, and he did a great job. What he did is he went out to a number of small communities in Texas, took a look at their websites, and then basically mimicked what they had done. And he produced this with a number of different things. So you could go out there and pay a utility bill, your power bill. You can go out there and see what the school system, look at the school system and see what's on the menu for today for your kids. You could do a number of different things. Go see, send an email to the mayor, the city manager, all those kind of things. And this is what it looked like. Did a great job. So what he did then is, after he got it going and got it all set up, we basically connected it to the internet, and sat back and watched what happened. So next slide. He left this connected for about 10 days. And just, like I said, we sat back. Now, there should have been nobody contacting or connecting to this site because there was no city of Roadrunner Park. It didn't exist. It was a fictitious city. But what we had was a number of people almost immediately start connecting to the site. And what we had was interestingly enough, anybody who was connecting here was probably connecting for a nefarious reason, since there isn't any real city of Roadrunner Park. So you could look at every connection to that website and the various sub websites, if you will. Every one of them is probably a malicious activity, or at least information gathering of some sort. It was a nefarious individual, nefarious purpose that this person was contacting. So he did that, and we found basically no doubt about it. In this short period of time, there were over 3,000 intrusion detection system alerts using the system called SNORT, which is a public domain one. What was interesting was that 55% of the attacks seemed to be coming from one of those sectors. And you can see the sectors off to the right. 45% of the attacks were not attributed to a sector, but they were potentially multiple sectors. And the most important thing, if you look at the numbers, the chart on the left there, you can see the one is one sector. The individual, they connected to just one sector. The two was they connected to one and they went to another, tried to go to another, three, and so on and so forth. The important one is the one up at the top with the asterisks. And what we saw there was we had almost half, 45% of the attacks couldn't be attributed necessarily to any one sector. And more importantly, the activity was such that it was low scale enough that normal monitoring of a network and what people look for would not have detected this attack or this information gathering attempt, because it would fly under the radar, so to speak. And I give an example of that. If you have a single failed logon attempt, a user ID password, single fail, or nobody alerts on that, because that happens all the time. Someone will make a typo in their login ID or their password. Happens all the time. So you're not going to sound an alarm and say, hey, there's an attack going on if you have one failed attempt. If, on the other hand, you see an attempt in one sector, and then in another sector you see a similar attack, same user ID password combination, and then a third sector, that means something. That's a totally different situation, because now you can look at that and say, oh, this is an attempt to do something. Someone is trying to break in. Someone's trying to find some low-hanging fruit here, so to speak. But that's not going to be detected using normal techniques. If people don't communicate, if people don't talk to each other and say, hey, have you seen this kind of activity going on? That was what was important. So to summarize that, almost half of what could be considered attacks would not normally be noticed unless you're talking to each other. Next slide, please. So what does this have to do with communities and critical infrastructures and the power system? We did we had a tabletop exercise a few years ago we did in Texas, and I've modified it now so it's more applicable to Wyoming. But what we had is we had a number of different communities that were having an exercise going on at the same time. And this was one of the events that they were presented with. So, for example, let's say in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, and on Friday the 17th of April, the Cheyenne police noticed this. They had an individual ran a stop sign, so they stopped the individual. And when the police pulled the individual over, they noticed this funny looking antenna and bunch of computer equipment in the car that these two individuals were playing around with. The question, okay, granted, the individuals ran a stop sign, so they're going to have to write them a ticket. But what might be going on here? And would your law enforcement personnel know what this is? What this is basically is someone using a special antenna, and it has a computer system, and they notice the map, of the Cheyenne area. What these people are doing is what is referred to as war driving. They're wandering around looking for potential open wireless access points. And specifically in this case, the area that they were driving around, block that they were driving around when they ran the stop sign, was where the local power company's offices were located. So is this something that would a law enforcement, normal law enforcement, a police officer, would they recognize the potential here, and would they tell it to anybody? Would they report this to anybody? And in Texas, when we asked this question, the answer was no. First of all, they might not even notice or understand what it was, and secondly, they probably wouldn't tell anybody about it. Next slide, please. So that was Friday the 17th.
If I can add to this, this is a very real life scenario. I actually had someone call me a few years ago from Cheyenne saying that there had been a person parked outside her house every night from 8 or 9 o'clock at night until 5 o'clock in the morning. And she would get up to go to the bathroom and look out the window, and the car would be running in the winter and she could see the exhaust coming out of it. And she finally confronted him and asked him what he was doing. And he had 5 or 6 cell phones and a few laptops in the car. And he said he was checking the lines. And right after she confronted him, she also thought that somebody had broken into her house, but she had no proof because everything seemed locked up. She just had that feeling that somebody was in her house. She had called the police a couple of times and they didn't do anything. They basically said, there's no law against parking in front of your house. And it wasn't quite, it was kind of on her property line, so it wasn't right in front of her house. Anyway, right after she confronted him, there was in 2 of her retirement accounts, somebody tried to transfer funds, and it wasn't her. So this does happen, and that is a real life example that somebody reported to me. So Greg's here talking about, police department and critical infrastructure, but what I'm saying is the police department didn't know what to do in that case and didn't know how to help her. And that's one of the points that he's making. So I'm going to go to the next slide, but I just wanted to give you that local example.
That's great. Great example. Thank you. And as mentioned, that was that was Friday the 17th. And then on Saturday in Laramie, you have a similar, apparently appears to be, from what we know, because we know what happened in Cheyenne the previous day, but it appears to be the same truck, same 2 individuals. And in this case, the police notices these people driving around a block, and what happens to be in the block is, once again, includes the facilities owned by the local power company. The officer pulls them over, just not to give them a ticket or anything, but just, hey, I noticed you driving around, you're circling this block. Are you looking for something? Can I help you? The police officer's attempting to be, helpful. Same situation. Now, once again, would the police in Laramie recognize what is the potential here? Would they talk to anybody? Next slide. And then what happens if that's at 10:40 in the morning, and then at 2:45 in the afternoon, the Rollins police noticed someone parked in a parking lot near a church that's in the Rollins Mennonite church parking lot, and they're just sitting there, but there's no church services going on, and they've been there for a little while, and they got this truck, and they've got this funny antenna, and so police officer approaches them to see if there's anything to do. And once again, they say, no, we're just, checking out our new fun, just like what happened with Laura. We're checking out our fun equipment and seeing how things are working. Now, interestingly enough, if you take a look at the map in Rollins, the parking lot for the Mennonite church happens to be just right next to the Rocky Mountain Power Company building. So once again, would the police know what this might be and the potential? That's what might be going on here. What someone might be trying to do, as the story that Laura mentioned there, that someone was trying to break in. Someone apparently did break into this woman's account at that point. Next slide. To summarize this, okay, so let's go ahead, click once. So on Friday, we saw something happen because we were sitting back here knowing what's going on. We saw something occur in Cheyenne on Friday. Next, click again. And then on Saturday, maybe there were 2 more. We talked about Laramie and Rollins, but maybe up in Cody Casper as well. And then next slide, or excuse me, one more time. And then Monday, supposedly the same, what happens if the same white truck we're seeing in Evanston and Green River, you know, and so on. So you see this is occurring in different places. Now, interestingly enough, we saw Saturday to Monday. Does that mean that they were off Sunday because they were off at church, or on Sunday did we just not notice it? And maybe they were up at Gillette or some other location in Wyoming, and it just nobody noticed it there. Now, the question that we asked down in Texas when we did this, because nobody in the individual community said, yeah, our police wouldn't know what that was or wouldn't know the potential implication of that. And so they wouldn't report it to anybody. And so then we did the same kind of map in Texas, say, okay, now let's take a look at this. Is there something going on here? Is this something that you might want to know something about? If you've got suspicious activity around one of your infrastructures, around your power company, around your energy, you got someone driving around, you got someone parked across the street, like the situation that Laura described, where someone's bunch of electronic equipment. Is this something that should be reported to somebody? At the very least, should the police talk to the power company and say, hey, we just noticed this activity. Maybe you ought to be a little bit more cautious and take a look at it a little bit harder at your monitoring of your computer networks to see if anything funny is going on. This is what we're talking about. This kind of thing goes on all the time. And if somebody wants to attack your infrastructure, whether it be in the Wyoming or specific communities within Wyoming, you have to understand the potential implication of some of the things that we saw. Next slide.
So we should talk about where the actual infrastructure is, and it might be close to you, teachers, so that you might actually be able to get a tour. And so this is from the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. It shows where the oil refineries are. So if you had somebody with antennas and computer equipment parked next to or circling an oil refinery, that physical security is definitely something that, you know, Dr. White pointed out as being really important. And then also the pipelines. You know, you could do physical damage to pipelines, and it would be vandalism and destruction, and it could disrupt our energy supply in Wyoming as well as in the surrounding states. But there's also wireless monitors on these, and quite frankly, and quite often there could be fiber lines that go along these as well. And then the coal mines and the power plants, you know, keeping the security so that our natural gas and our coal continues to flow to our power plants. And there's one more down here, just didn't fit. We have several coal-fired power plants in Wyoming and natural gas. But I was kind of surprised when I was looking up on the website, even in just Wikipedia, we have a lot of hydroelectric power plants and hydroelectric dams, more than what I thought. The megawatts per hour that they generate is significant. My brother was telling me that 1 megawatt hour can power about 600 to 700 homes. So that's very significant. I mean, Wyoming is the energy capital of the nation, but not just because of coal, because we have wind farms, we have hydroelectric, and we're getting a new nuclear power plant in Kemmerer, and they've already broken ground on it. So be thinking about what is in your backyard, teachers, so that you can talk to your friends, family, neighbors, and see if you can get a tour for your students for some of these types of things that are next door, because the career angles are excellent as well, not just for the industry, but an IT and cybersecurity angle on the energy industry. And I'm going to give it back to Dr. White next.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, one of the things that I mentioned and hit upon here is the whole concept of the information sharing. But also I want to mention that, you know, when it comes to cybersecurity, one of the things, especially when we talk to someone like in the banking sector, if you try to, we've had to try to convince folks like Wells Fargo, hey, if something is happening to you, Wells Fargo, what's the chance that it's also happening to Bank of America or First National Bank or whatever? Chances are it is. And when it comes to cybersecurity, it's not Wells Fargo versus Bank of America versus First National. It's all of us, including those folks not in the sector. It's all of us against those who may want to harm us in one way, shape, or form. As mentioned, we saw, based on the research study that we did at UT San Antonio, if something's going on in one sector, what's the chance that it may be occurring in other sectors? We saw that kind of thing, and it is oftentimes at a low level, which might not normally be considered important until you take a step back and see it's happening in multiple sectors. Information sharing is absolutely critical. And it's not just information sharing between the sectors and between individuals in the sectors, but the citizens can play an important part. Who's going to notice someone driving around with funny equipment? That might be just a citizen walking down the street. It's important for all of us to understand what could be occurring. And the last statement is there about cybersecurity and security in general. It's a team sport. It's not individual. And then the question to ask, though, is in a community, who's the coach? Who's going to be the coach and is going to be that central point? Well, a natural central point is either going to be the local government or the folks like the local law enforcement. One other question one might ask is, what's the likelihood of any of this? I mean, why would anybody want to attack Lyman, Wyoming, which is where we're at, or Cheyenne, or Laramie, or any of the cities that we mentioned today? There's a couple different. We absolutely positively know for a fact that some of our potential adversaries at a national level, so Russia, China, so on and so forth, there's a lot of evidence and have been a lot of incidents where they have attempted to break into, and in many cases have been successful in breaking into various critical infrastructures, in particular power. Power has been one of the major targets of these foreign nations. And what they do once they get in is they generally plan some back doors so they can potentially get in, and then they don't do anything else. They just leave it. The question to ask, obviously, is, well, if they broke in, why didn't they do something? Well, it's setting the groundwork for potentially something that they may need in the future. But it's also not just those foreign adversaries or potential foreign adversaries. Another potential adversary would be the various individuals and organizations within the country who, for whatever reason, have an objection to something. For example, coal power plants. How many people are opposed to coal power plants in this country? Nuclear plant going in, absolutely positively guaranteed that there will be people that will attempt to break into that facility, from a cyber standpoint. Absolutely guarantee when that goes up, it will be a target because of various groups that are opposed to nuclear energy, that are opposed to coal, opposed to various things. And we have a lot of people, and those individuals, and you can see this across the country, they're getting to be much more active. Used to be someone would protest, little placards and protest outside a facility, but now they're doing much more destructive things. So this is a real potential, a real problem for all of us that we all need to be cognizant of, be aware of, and to potentially do our part as part of the security team. Next.
Well, I want to add one more thing, because I love the team sport and part of the security team and what you're talking about. And I just want to talk about a small town in Wyoming. So let's talk about Glendo and Wheatland, where the hydroelectric power plant is. And it's outside of Wheatland. And let's talk about, they have a library, they have a bank, they have the mayor's office, the city offices. And if those four entities, the power plant, the library, the mayor's office, and who else did I say? Oh, the bank. If those four entities decided to have coffee once every 2 weeks at Western Skies in Wheatland, which is the diner there, and just do some basic information sharing about threats that they're seeing, that entire community of Wheatland would be more secure. And that's what you're telling us today about security as a team sport, correct?
Yes, that is absolutely, that's a great example. You don't have to have some exceedingly organized set of a group of individuals who form an information sharing and analysis center or something like that. It could simply be that informal coffee that you're talking about. As long as people are coming together to talk about cybersecurity and what's going on and what they're seeing, that puts that will put a community way ahead of most other communities in the country.
So it's easy to do, and we're probably already having coffee with these people. We're probably just not talking about cybersecurity, which if we could just add that, we'd be farther along in our security stance across the state. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to your next slide now.
So just in case anybody ever does experience a cyber incident, the last slide right here is, okay, what do I do about it? What do I do? Who do I report to? You can certainly report to, depending on the sector, you might want to contact the sector or something, but you can also just report to Wyoming. There is you notice there with the red arrow, there's a reporting mechanism, and there's the website, the ets.wyo.gov/cybersecurity, that you can go to report a cyber incident. Because once again, if it's happening to you in Laramie, what's the chance of it happening to someone in Gillette or Casper or Cody, or you get the idea. The chances are it's happening at in other areas as well. And if we let the Wyoming know about it, then that information can get out to everybody. And next, I think that's it. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you folks today. I appreciate that, Laura. Thank you very much, and Cyber Wyoming for all that they do in Wyoming. It's exciting to be part of a state that has an entity such as that, and have people that are as involved in cybersecurity as Cyber Wyoming is, and is the state as the state is as well.
Well, thank you for contributing to our challenge topic this year. Through the grant, through the Idaho National Lab. I think your perspective is very different than what we're going to get from other subject matter experts that we interview for teacher ideas. Because yours, I loved how you were talking about, well, the church is right across the street from Rocky Mountain Power. People don't think about the offices as much, and they might think more about, going out to the actual oil refinery or the actual power plant. And so they don't think about the office workers, and that's what hit with Colonial Pipeline. They didn't have their office system separated from their operational systems where the pipeline was, and that's why the ransomware attack hit and affected the East Coast years ago. So I think it's really a great perspective, and I thank you for sharing that with us today.
And if I may add to that one comment that you made, which is an excellent comment, does that office environment, is there somebody or several somebodies there that do have access to the computer systems that do connect to the operational ones? A lot of our stuff in the critical infrastructures is remotely controlled. And where is that remote control from? An office somewhere. So both the office system and the operational systems could be right there.
Thank you. Yep, great advice. Students and teachers, I hope you think of some great examples for this. And if you do end up creating some sort of experiment, like Dr. White was talking about, or encouraging an information sharing and analysis organization in your community, or maybe even creating some sort of honeypot website and seeing how many hits you get, let us know and make sure you make your video about it, because it could be a really fun activity for your class. Thank you so much.
Just don't attempt to break into any place.
What
Not
was
a good
that?
idea. Don't attempt to break into any place. Not a good
Yes.
idea.
That is illegal. Yes. Do not break into anything, but you can definitely set up a honeypot if you'd like. Thank you
Yes.
so much, and have a fabulous day. And thank you, Dr. White, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.